Brittney Griner, who was imprisoned in Russia in a man's prison, which I had no idea about.
Brittney Griner is under fire for extremely aggressive behavior portrayed toward Caitlin Clark, the rookie from last year, the one that has everybody's focus in the WNBA. And this incident has, of course, gone viral online, but also sparked up some other skeletons in Brittney's closet that she probably wants to.
She didn't hear the crowd at first, just the scream of her own heartbeat as medical staff swarmed her in the tunnel, their radios crackling with coded urgency. Brittney Griner had lived through pressure storms before, but nothing like this. Nothing where the league's brightest lights, its most explosive rivalries, and an entire arena's tension funneled into one shattering moment being replayed online before she could even stand upright. And the worst part wasn't the fall, or the collision, or the stunned gasp that rippled through the court when she didn't get back up. It was the way people were already twisting the narrative, already sharpening their theories about her and Caitlin Clark, already stitching together slow-motion clips like forensic investigators hungry for scandal. The whispers spread faster than the medical team could move. Did someone push her? Did she collapse from exhaustion? Was this tied to the heated exchange minutes earlier? Social media detonated in real time, hashtags burning across the timeline, commentators speculating with reckless confidence while trainers tried to steady her trembling hands. Cameras chased her down the tunnel, flashes slicing through the panic as she tried and failed to mask the rising dread in her chest. But then came the moment no one expected. The doctors' faces tightening, their attention narrowing, one of them whispering something that made even Brittney's skin go cold. Whatever they found, it wasn't normal. It wasn't routine. And it wasn't something the league could hide. And that's when everything truly began to unravel. The truth was, the tension between Brittney and Caitlin hadn't begun under the bright arena lights. It had been building long before the cameras ever caught their names side by side. It lived in whispered comparisons, in analysts pinning one era against another, in reporters hungry to turn mentorship into rivalry and rivalry into war. And for Brittney, who had spent years fighting for her place, surviving storms that would have broken anyone else, the sudden rise of Caitlin felt like déjà vu. Another young phenom being positioned as the league's new everything. The league loved to crown a new face. And every time they did, Brittney felt the shadow over her own legacy deepen. She wasn't jealous, not exactly. It was more complicated, heavy with pride, anger, protectiveness, fear, and the kind of pressure that twisted even the best intentions into something unrecognizable. Caitlin, for her part, carried her own ghosts. She admired Brittney, almost worshipped her dominance, but the league had thrust her into a spotlight so blinding that she couldn't see where admiration ended and competition began. Every press conference question comparing her to Brittney was a spark thrown into a vat of gasoline neither woman ever asked to stand near. Behind closed doors, the league fed it. Executives wanted storylines, engagement, heat. Anything that kept cameras pointed toward the court and fans arguing online. And nothing worked better than tension between generations. They pushed subtle narratives, encouraged bold quotes, celebrated viral moments that inflamed fan bases. Brittney saw it happening, felt it tightening around her like a rope she couldn't stop. But she never imagined the emotional cost it would exact. Until the night everything changed. The months leading up to the incident had been brutal. Brittney's body had been warning her for weeks. Pulses of pain in her chest, unexplained exhaustion, dizzy spells she blamed on travel. The team medical staff insisted everything looked within expected levels. But Brittney felt something was off. She knew her body better than anyone. She felt it slipping, shifting, sounding alarms she couldn't decode. And yet every time she thought about stepping back, the world's expectations chained her in place. Meanwhile, Caitlin felt suffocated by her own meteoric rise. She had been thrust into the role of savior, icon, revolution, titles no rookie should be forced to carry. Every appearance, every comment, every micro-expression of emotion became a headline. And the constant pressure twisted her nerves until even harmless interactions with veterans felt like interrogation scenes. She worried Brittney saw her as a threat, not a successor. She feared she was ruining her relationship with a player she'd admired her entire life. She hated how the media turned every bump, every glance, every competitive moment into tension or disrespect. The truth? She didn't want to replace Brittney. She wanted to learn from her. But no one ever asked what she wanted. The seeds of the tunnel chaos were planted weeks earlier, during a closed practice scrimmage that the league tried desperately to keep off the record. It was supposed to be a friendly joint session between rising stars and established legends. But pressure makes people brittle, and fatigue makes tempers sharp. When Caitlin sank a deep three, and one of the reporters on the sideline yelled something about the new face of the league, Brittney felt something inside her fracture. She forced a smile, but everyone saw the crack. Caitlin noticed. She tried to approach her afterward, tried to talk, tried to tell her she respected her more than anyone. But Brittney brushed past with a tight jaw and exhausted eyes. She wasn't angry at Caitlin, not truly. She was angry at the machine around them, the one that fed on conflict and spit out damaged relationships. But Caitlin walked away convinced she had done something wrong. From that moment, every interaction between them carried invisible weight. Every game felt like a referendum. Every moment they shared the court felt like it belonged to millions of people watching, judging, dissecting. The pressure sharpened until one night, in front of a roaring crowd and a national audience, something finally snapped. Not in anger, not in violence, but in the fragile space where adrenaline, exhaustion, and buried emotion collide. The scramble for a loose ball, the collision, the way Brittney staggered before collapsing. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't intentional. But the world didn't care. All they saw was two players whose rivalry had been hyped into a storm. All they needed were a few seconds of footage to ignite chaos. But in those moments before Brittney hit the floor, before Caitlin's face turned ghost white in horror, before fans started screaming, before cameras swarmed the tunnel, there was a truth no one yet knew. A truth rooted deep in Brittney's physical condition. Something that had been building silently, dangerously, waiting for the wrong moment to explode. And that truth was about to tear open the league in ways neither woman could imagine. Under the blazing arena lights, the moment Brittney was rushed into the tunnel ignited a pressure wave the league wasn't ready for. The headquarters of WNBA lit up with frantic calls from executives demanding updates, terrified not just for her health, but for the political earthquake this incident would unleash. For months, the league had leaned heavily into the generational narrative. The veteran titan and the rising phenom, two faces of different eras orbiting the same spotlight. They wanted tension, engagement, virality. But they never imagined the storyline would erupt into a medical emergency that forced every executive to confront the consequences of a pressure campaign that had pushed both athletes to their limits. Even before doctors examined her, rumors were detonating across social platforms. Clips of the collision spread like wildfire, slow-motion angles, zoomed-in breakdowns, speculative commentary spiraling out of control. Some fans blamed the schedule, some blamed league fatigue, some blamed the relentless coverage that pitted generations against each other. Others spun wild theories, claiming she'd been hiding an injury for weeks. The narrative mutated by the minute, and the league's silence only fueled the blaze. Inside the tunnel, Caitlin was a storm barely contained. She kept replaying the moment in her mind. The scramble, the collision, the way Brittney's body reacted unnaturally, like something internal had already been wrong before they even made contact. She tried to approach the medical staff, but security gently pulled her back, explaining that they needed space. The words barely registered. Her eyes were locked on the emergency team surrounding Brittney, on the panic stitched into their movements. She wasn't worried about camera angles, public narratives, or headlines. She was terrified something deeper, something hidden, had been happening long before tonight. The locker room felt colder than usual. Caitlin sat alone, shoulders trembling, staring at the unopened water bottle in her hands. Teammates hovered nearby, unsure whether to speak. They could feel the tension radiating off her, a mix of guilt, fear, and confusion twisting her expression. She kept whispering. Something wasn't right, something was off. To no one in particular, as if confessing to the empty air. Across the arena, Brittney was rushed into a private medical room. The doctors worked in hushed urgency, checking vitals, running rapid assessments, exchanging glances that made her stomach sink. She tried to sit up, but dizziness overtook her, bending the room at the edges. One doctor placed a steadying hand on her shoulder and told her to breathe, but the trembling in their voice only made her more afraid. When league representatives arrived, they expected a routine update, fatigue, dehydration, perhaps a stress-related fainting episode. But the lead physician cleared his throat and spoke in a tone that instantly changed the atmosphere. Something in her blood work was abnormal. Unexplained markers. Elevated readings where stability should exist. Signs that her body had been under dangerous internal strain for far longer than anyone realized. This wasn't caused by the collision. This had been building silently, unnoticed, masked by travel, adrenaline, and the demands of a season teetering on the edge of overload. The executives exchanged looks that bordered on panic. If this was true, it meant the league's scheduling, media pressure, and relentless spotlight weren't just overwhelming emotionally. They might have pushed an athlete into a medical crisis. They knew how the public would react. They knew the accusations that would follow. And they knew the narrative they'd been promoting, veteran versus phenom, passing of the torch, generational clash, would suddenly look like a cruel machinery grinding its own stars into the ground. When Brittney heard the words potential cardiac stress indicators, her breath caught. She wasn't invincible, but she also wasn't prepared for the possibility that her body had been screaming warnings she'd been too busy or too pressured to acknowledge. The doctor explained that symptoms she brushed off, fatigue, dizziness, chest pressure, could have been red flags of something developing weeks ago. She closed her eyes, furious at herself for ignoring them, furious at the system that taught her to push through everything, furious that her collapse was now a weapon the world would twist. The league reps begged her to stay quiet until they understood the situation. They didn't want misinformation to spread. They didn't want panic. They didn't want questions they weren't prepared to answer. But Brittney knew silence could be just as dangerous as chaos. She didn't trust the league to protect her story, to tell it honestly, without spin or strategy. Yet she also didn't want to spark a media explosion before she even had clarity about her own health. The pressure suffocated her, tightening her chest in ways the monitor could not measure. Meanwhile, reporters were circling like hawks. The team PR staff scrambled to assemble a statement, but every draft sounded hollow. Precautionary evaluation, stable condition, no cause for alarm. They knew none of those phrases would survive contact with the online firestorm already burning. Back in the locker room, Caitlin finally learned she was barred from visiting Brittney until the doctors cleared it. The decision wasn't personal, it was protocol, but it hit her like a punch. She felt powerless, cut off, isolated. The ache in her chest deepened as she imagined millions online framing her as the catalyst for something she didn't understand and never intended. She overheard staff whispering about medical anomalies, and her knees nearly buckled. If something serious was happening to Brittney, if this had been brewing inside her long before tonight, Caitlin didn't know how to process that weight. The first shocking twist came when one of the doctors stepped out into the hallway to speak privately with a league official, unaware that a staffer with a phone in hand had turned the corner at the worst possible moment. The staffer froze, overhearing just enough to catch a few electrifying words. Not collision-related, pre-existing, dangerous levels, weeks of warning signs. Their face drained of color. They knew what those words would mean if they leaked. They knew the storyline would pivot instantly, from rivalry drama to a league scandal about neglected player health. And they panicked. In the most disastrous split-second decision possible, the staffer sent a vague, cryptic message to a friend. It wasn't the fall. Something's been wrong for weeks. They're hiding it. That friend sent it to someone else. Then someone else posted it. And within minutes, the world detonated. Fans erupted, demanding answers. Commentators speculated with reckless abandon. Conspiracy theories multiplied, some blaming the schedule, some blaming the league's attempts to capitalize on the generational rivalry, some even suggesting the league ignored medical red flags to keep ratings high. Brittney's name trended globally alongside panicked hashtags and furious debates tearing apart the league's credibility. Caitlin saw the posts and felt the ground shift beneath her. Suddenly, she wasn't the center of speculation. She was the face of a narrative collapsing under its own weight. She wanted to scream at the world to stop twisting everything, to stop turning players into pawns, to stop framing her as a symbol of destruction instead of a rookie trying to survive her own pressure storm. But the worst blow came when she realized Brittney might be seeing the same posts, might be believing the world thought she was hiding some weakness, might think the league viewed her as a storyline, not a person. The emotional quake rippled through both women, but the aftershocks? Those were only beginning, because the medical team hadn't revealed the most alarming discovery yet. The one that would change everything. The one that would shatter the league's plans, ignite a nationwide uproar, and drag the generational rivalry into a firestorm neither woman could escape. And when that truth finally surfaced, nothing in the world would be able to contain it. The arena hallways were a maze of frantic footsteps, urgent whispers, and the metallic echo of doors slamming as staff scrambled to contain a situation spiraling far beyond their control. Outside the medical room, League officials from the WNBA huddled around glowing phones, their faces illuminated by the wildfire spreading across social media. Fans were demanding transparency. Commentators were declaring the league negligent. Analysts were tearing apart the generational storyline that executives had spent months crafting. Everything the league built, its narratives, its marketing, its carefully balanced politics, was unraveling like a thread pulled from a tapestry. Inside, Brittney lay hooked to monitors, trying to process what the doctors had just told her. The beeping machines, the sterile lighting, the tense energy felt unreal, like she'd been dropped into someone else's nightmare. She stared at the ceiling, replaying every ignored symptom, every brushed-off dizzy spell, every moment she forced herself to push harder. The doctor's words echoed again. These readings suggest prolonged internal stress. Not from tonight, from weeks of overload. Weeks. She felt her stomach twist. The soft knock on the door made her flinch. A league representative stepped in, attempting a calm smile that didn't reach their trembling eyes. They told her gently, but urgently, that she would have to address the public soon. A statement was necessary. The league was managing a narrative storm. She needed to reassure fans, de-escalate panic, keep the situation from exploding further. But the request hit Brittney like a blow. She wasn't ready to speak. Not to the press, not to fans, not to anyone. She needed answers, not spotlights. The idea of stepping in front of cameras while uncertainty roared inside her felt unbearable. Yet she knew the machine. The league didn't run on comfort. It ran on control. They needed her voice to calm the chaos. And chaos was everywhere. Across the building, Caitlin sat on the floor of a quiet hallway, knees pulled to her chest, head buried in her hands. Every few minutes, someone tried to talk to her, coaches, teammates, media liaisons, but she couldn't respond. The pressure had crushed her voice. The weight of public speculation felt suffocating. Every trending hashtag, every accusation, every wild theory online made it harder to breathe. She knew no one blamed her internally, no teammate, no coach. The collision was incidental, an unavoidable moment in a high-intensity play. But the world didn't care about nuance. They wanted someone to blame, someone to dissect, someone to drag into their storm of narratives. And even worse, Caitlin felt like she had failed Brittney on a deeply human level. She should have noticed the signs. She should have insisted Brittney rest after practices where she looked pale. She should have said something when she saw her struggling with short breaths. She admired Brittney too much to ever overstep, but now that restraint felt like guilt. When a staff member told her there were complications being discussed, she nearly collapsed. Complications. She clung to the word, terrified of what it implied. Meanwhile, behind locked doors deep inside the arena, the lead medical specialist reviewed Brittney's scans again and again, each pass confirming the same disturbing anomaly. Something in her cardiovascular readings wasn't just abnormal, it was fluctuating unpredictably. The stress markers surged higher than expected for any athlete, even after intense gameplay. And certain patterns indicated her body had been entering a state of severe exertion risk without her recognizing it. But there was something else. Something that made the doctor call in a second opinion. Not an injury, not trauma, not the collision. Something systemic. Something that required more than a single doctor to explain. The medical team gathered around the screen, their faces slowly hardening into alarm. The lead physician whispered, "If this is what I think it is, she's been on the brink for much longer than she knows." The league officials demanded answers, pressing the doctors for clarity. But the physicians refused to give definitive statements until further tests were run. The uncertainty was gasoline on the inferno consuming the league's public image. As panic grew internally, the external world erupted. Sports networks interrupted programming with breaking coverage. Analysts debated whether the league had overlooked player wellness in favor of ratings. Fan groups clashed online, some defending Caitlin, some defending Brittney, others blaming the league for engineering a rivalry that pushed both athletes too far. Then came the first major external blow, a leaked internal memo. Nobody knew who leaked it. Nobody knew why. But within minutes, screenshots flooded social media. The memo, dated weeks earlier, outlined concerns from a team physician about increased fatigue markers in veteran players due to the intensified promotional schedule. Brittney's name was visible, highlighted. The memo warned her workload might need adjustment. And it had been ignored. The league officials' phones exploded. Journalists demanded statements. Fans called the situation corporate negligence. Caitlin read the memo on her phone and burst into tears. She had spent the last hour drowning in guilt over a collision that wasn't even the cause. She had blamed herself for something the doctors were now saying had roots long before tonight. Now, faced with proof that Brittney had been pushed too hard, Caitlin felt her admiration twist into a painful, protective fury. She stood, wiping her face, determination cutting through the fear. She didn't care about protocols anymore. She didn't care about the league's media rules. She needed to see Brittney. She needed to tell her she wasn't alone. Security tried to stop her, gently blocking her path. But Caitlin's voice broke as she pleaded. "I don't want to talk to cameras," she said. "I just want to talk to her." Her desperation softened the guards. They stepped aside. Inside the medical room, Brittney heard the door open and felt the shift in air before she saw the person entering. When she turned her head and saw Caitlin, eyes red, breath trembling, her heart twisted. Neither spoke at first. They just stared at each other, two athletes united not by rivalry but by fear, pressure, and the brutal machinery of expectations. Finally, Brittney whispered, "It wasn't your fault." Caitlin shook her head violently. "I should have." No, Brittney's voice was firm despite the weakness in her body. "This was coming. I just didn't want to see it." Their hands brushed, a quiet moment of human connection drowned by reporters screaming outside the arena walls. But inside that small room, for the first time, truth cut through the noise. Their rivalry had never been the danger. The pressure surrounding it had. Before they could speak further, the lead doctor re-entered, face pale. They asked both athletes to sit. What they were about to share wasn't just medical. It wasn't just urgent. It was explosive, career-altering, league-shaking. And it would become the second major twist that no one, fans, league officials, or even the players were prepared for. The doctor took a breath. "We found something in Brittney's tests," they said quietly. "Something that changes everything." And with those words, the world around them stopped. Before you scroll, breathe, because everything you just heard is only the beginning. What happened tonight isn't just a medical mystery, or a league disaster, or a shocking collapse that shook the entire world of women's basketball. It's a warning shot. A breaking point. A moment that demands accountability, truth, and action from every corner of the sport, from the fans, from the league, from the media, and from anyone who claims to care about the athletes who give everything on that court. This story isn't about rivalry. It isn't about hype. It isn't about the endless comparisons pushed night after night. It's about the real emotional, physical, and psychological cost of a system stretched to its limit. One that even giants like Brittney can't outrun, and rising stars like Caitlin can't shield themselves from. The pressure isn't invisible anymore. It's right here, exposed under blinding lights the league can't dim. Not after tonight. Not after everything we've seen. And now, more than ever, you are part of this moment. The fans who fill arenas. The voices online. The people who celebrate these athletes, uplift them, challenge the league to do better, and refuse to look away when things go wrong. This story isn't over. Not even close, and your reaction shapes what happens next. Whether the league listens, whether the full truth comes out, whether players get protection instead of pressure, whether the system changes or stays buried in silence. So don't just watch. Don't just scroll past. Don't let this become another forgotten headline. If you're invested in Brittney's health, in Caitlin's emotional spiral, in the future of the WNBA itself, then this is your moment to stay locked in. Because the next chapter is coming, and it's going to hit harder than anything before. Drop your thoughts. Drop your theories. Demand answers. Share the story. Stay loud. Stay present. And whatever you do,